She signed the papers on a rainy Tuesday, thinking she was saving her family from ruin. What she didn't know was that she was also signing away her heart. For 2 years, Lina West lived as a wife in name only, in a cold penthouse, beside a man who spoke in business deals and silence. She wasn't supposed to fall in love. He wasn't supposed to care. But one night, at a glittering charity gala, another man saw what her husband had ignored, and that changed everything. Jealousy, secrets, a truth that shattered her, and a choice that would either break them apart forever or prove that even the coldest hearts can learn how to love. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. The first time Lina West saw Dominic Arden, he didn't smile. He stood beneath the glow of the chandelier in her father's study, hands in the pockets of a tailored charcoal suit, eyes sharp, unreadable. He looked like a man carved from granite. Not rude, not arrogant, just entirely unbothered, as if nothing in the world could touch him, not even her presence in the room. She had just turned 24. Her mother had insisted she wear the soft blue dress. It brings out your eyes, and she remembered feeling ridiculous, overdressed for what she thought was a polite dinner with a business partner. It wasn't until the decanter of scotch appeared and her father's tone shifted into one of forced calm that she realized something was off. "You remember Mr. Arden," her father said. "Dominic." She didn't. Not really. Maybe she had seen his name in the business section of the paper or heard it murmured in hushed tones when her father's company began to falter. Still, she shook his hand. Firm, cool, controlled. "We'll only ask one thing of you," her father said afterward, when Dominic had stepped out to take a call. 2 years. No obligations beyond appearances. Just help us, please. That night, Lina didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling of her childhood room while rain pelted the window, trying to make sense of the proposal. Marriage. For 2 years. To save the company. To save the family. It was supposed to be a formality. A quiet union. No press. No wedding bells. Just a ceremony at City Hall and a signature that would buy her father time and Dominic his merger. She wasn't promised love. She never asked for it. But she told herself one lie that night. A lie she believed out of desperation. He'll be kind. He wasn't cruel. But kindness was something else entirely. They moved into his penthouse the day after the ceremony. He gave her a wing of the apartment, a credit card she never used, and a driver who knew to take her wherever she needed, except into his world. He worked late, traveled often, ate dinner alone, even when she was home. The few times they crossed paths in the marble hallways or the shared kitchen, he greeted her with nods, never words. And when he did speak, it was only about schedules, functions, contracts, never anything human. In time, Lina stopped trying to speak at all. She went back to painting, quietly, alone, canvases stacked against the walls of a room no one else entered. She applied for a part-time role at an art center downtown. Nothing public-facing, just cataloging, helping with exhibitions. Dominic signed the permission papers without looking. Their marriage became a performance, a shared surname on invitations, coordinated appearances at quarterly charity events, photographs where she smiled softly at his shoulder while he looked elsewhere. 2 years passed this way, until the invitation arrived, handwritten, gold-trimmed. The Winter Light Ball, a private, black-tie fundraiser held each December at the old Langford estate. Hosted by biotech magnate Julian Graves, it was the kind of event that attracted the city's most influential names. Dominic had never taken her to it before. But this year, He placed the envelope on the breakfast counter and said, "We leave at 7. Dress accordingly." Lina stared at the embossed lettering long after he left the room. She chose a dress she had never worn, deep emerald, with a low back and sleeves that shimmered faintly under light. Her hair she wore loose. She didn't do it for him. She did it to remind herself that she still existed, that somewhere beneath the glass walls and silences she was still a woman with a pulse. The ballroom glowed with soft gold light and floating candles. A string quartet played near the grand staircase, and for the first time in months, Dominic offered her his arm. She took it. For the cameras. They mingled. He spoke to investors. She smiled, nodded, stood in silence at his side. Nothing had changed, until it did. Julian Graves arrived halfway through the evening, warm eyes, tousled hair, and easy presence that drew people without effort. He moved through the room like someone who had nothing to prove. He stopped when he reached them. "Dominic," he said, "didn't expect to see you here." "Julian." A curt nod. Then Julian looked at her. "And who is this?" he asked, though his tone said he already knew. Dominic hesitated. "My wife, Lina." Julian's gaze held hers a second longer than it should have. Not with flirtation, but with genuine recognition. "Pleasure to meet you, Lina." He took her hand, brushed it with his thumb. "That color suits you." She smiled, startled by how quickly warmth returned to her chest. How easy it felt to be seen. Dominic said nothing. Julian lingered, speaking to her about the gallery at the event, the new installations in the East Wing, the artist who painted only with broken glass. For 10 minutes, she was no longer invisible. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she noticed it, the shift in Dominic's posture. The way his jaw tightened. The way his hand curled ever so slightly at his side. He was listening. Watching. And for the first time since they were married, he looked at her. Not through her. Not past her. At her. Something cracked barely in his expression. Something wild and uncertain. Jealousy. Maybe. Or a realization. But the moment passed. And when Julian excused himself, Dominic turned to her, voice low. "You're enjoying yourself." She blinked. "Is that a problem?" His eyes didn't leave hers. Not at all. But the tone said otherwise. That night, he didn't speak in the car. Not even when she took off her heels and curled her feet beneath her. Not when she glanced at him with quiet challenge in her eyes. And certainly not when they stepped into the penthouse and went their separate ways. But something had changed. Not in the air. In him. And Lina, for the first time, felt the storm coming. The next morning, Lina woke early. Not because she had slept well, but because her mind had replayed the gala on a loop all night, the lights, the music, Julian's voice, Dominic's silence. His expression had haunted her most, that single flicker of something unspoken behind his eyes. She dressed simply. No makeup. Her favorite worn coat. She made tea, not coffee, and stared at the skyline from the tall glass window of the kitchen while the city stretched itself awake. Dominic was already gone. Of course he was. A note rested by the fruit bowl, meeting. Late evening. Don't wait up. She didn't. Instead, she took the subway, not the town car, and went to the gallery. She hadn't told him she'd taken a temporary assistant role there again. She no longer felt the need to report. Not when her words slipped past him like air. That afternoon, as she helped hang a new exhibit, bold abstract pieces from a young deaf artist, she felt something stir inside her. Not grief. Not regret. Something quieter but steadier. Self. Lina West had almost disappeared inside a wife she'd never meant to become. But yesterday reminded her she still had a voice. A presence. A name. And someone had said it like it mattered. When she returned home that evening, the penthouse was quiet. The lights were dimmed. For a moment, she thought she was alone until she saw him. Dominic. Standing on the balcony, still in his suit, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled to the elbows. One hand in his pocket, the other holding a glass he hadn't sipped from. She paused in the doorway. He didn't turn, but his voice reached her. You looked different last night. She blinked. Different? He turned slowly. His gaze met hers, and this time, he didn't look away. Not hidden, he said. Lina crossed her arms, guarding herself. Maybe I was never hiding. Maybe you just weren't looking. A long pause. She stepped into the room, the silence between them thick, complicated. You didn't say much on the drive home, she added. He studied her. What did you want me to say? She laughed softly, not cruel but tired. Something, anything. You looked at me like I was a stranger. I didn't recognize you. She tilted her head. And now, his voice dropped. I'm still figuring that out. It was the first honest thing he'd said in months. Lina didn't answer. She turned away, walking toward her room. But just before closing the door, she said, without looking back, start figuring it out quickly, Dominic. I won't stay invisible forever. The door clicked shut. Over the next week, something shifted. Subtle things. He came home earlier. Not every night, but often enough that it felt intentional. He noticed small things, her paintings, the books she left on the table, the way she tied her hair when she was frustrated. He didn't say much, but he observed. And that was new. He even asked a question once. About her work. Do you like it? The gallery? She nodded. I do. That was it. Nothing more. But it lingered. And then came the lunch. A discreet invitation from Julian Graves, hand-delivered to the gallery. A thank you for the conversation, it said. A private tour of his upcoming installation, if she was interested. She debated mentioning it to Dominic. But when she did, casually over breakfast, he didn't react the way she expected. He lowered his newspaper. You're going. I might. It's not a date, if that's what you're asking. I didn't say it was. No, she said, meeting his gaze. But you're thinking it. He folded the paper. I don't trust him. You don't even know him. I know men like him. Lina stood. Then maybe you should have seen me sooner, Dominic, before someone else did. She left without another word. The lunch with Julian wasn't romantic. It was kind, thoughtful, real. They talked about art, about the strange loneliness of wealth, about finding purpose in noise. He listened when she spoke. He smiled without agenda, and he never once asked her about her marriage. But as she stepped into the car afterward, she realized she felt something else. Guilt. Why? Because, for the first time in 2 years, she had felt safe, and it hadn't been with her husband. That evening, Dominic waited in the living room. Unusual. He stood when she entered, his expression unreadable. You didn't say where you were going. She raised an eyebrow. You never ask. I'm asking now. Lina exhaled. Lunch. With someone who remembers I exist. His jaw tightened. She moved past him, then stopped. Why does it bother you? Because you're my wife. She turned slowly. Now that's interesting. You remember that when someone else shows interest. Not when I cry myself to sleep in the room next to yours. Silence. He stepped closer. I never meant to hurt you. That's the problem, Dominic. You never meant anything. She left him standing there, silent, broken in a way she didn't understand yet. That night, he didn't sleep. He paced the hall, sat in his office, staring at her wedding photo. One she didn't know he kept. She had smiled in it, softly, hopefully, naively. He remembered the day she signed the papers. Rain on the windows, her hands trembling. The way she said, I'll do it for them. He had thought she knew, but maybe she hadn't. and maybe that mattered more than he ever let himself believe. The next morning, Lina didn't speak to him. She prepared coffee in silence. The same kitchen, the same marble floor, but it all felt different now, the kind of different that couldn't be undone with a tired apology. Dominic stood in the doorway, shirt sleeves rolled, jaw unshaven, like he hadn't slept much. He looked at her, and for once not through her. But she didn't look back. Later that day, while organizing canvases at the gallery, her phone buzzed with an email from a private account. The subject line was simple: "Do you know the real reason he married you?" Her stomach turned. She clicked it open. Inside, a single line: "The merger wasn't about rescuing your father's company. It was about absorbing it." Below that, an attachment. A copy of a sealed agreement signed weeks before the wedding. Her father's signature. Dominic's. Terms outlining the transfer of assets, stock options, and a clause specifying the marriage as a public relations guarantee of unity. Her name was listed under personal collateral. For a moment, the gallery blurred around her. She sat down hard, the document still open on her phone. She had known it was a contract, a marriage of convenience, but she had believed, foolishly, that she had some agency in it, that it was about saving her family, not selling her. She left the gallery early. When she stepped into the penthouse, Dominic was there. Jacket off, tie loosened, as if he'd been waiting. "Lina," he began. She didn't let him speak. "You knew," she said, voice shaking. "You knew what they were doing, what I was to them, what I was to you." He closed his eyes. "It wasn't supposed to." "Don't," she said, her voice sharper now. "Don't lie. Not now." He took a step closer. She stepped back. "Did you ever intend to tell me? I thought you knew. I thought your father." She laughed bitterly. "Of course you did, because that would make it easier, wouldn't it? You let me believe I was saving them, that I had a choice, when in reality you were just collecting a signature." "Lina, I was a transaction," she said, each word like glass. "Just another part of the deal." Dominic looked like he'd been punched. "I didn't see you that way. Then how did you see me?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. She shook her head, turned to go. "Lina, please. Don't follow me," she whispered. She left. The night air was sharp. She walked without direction, her thoughts scattered and raw. The betrayal cut deeper than she'd expected, not just because of the lie, but because part of her had begun to hope. Hope that maybe he was changing, that maybe the way he looked at her lately meant something. But it hadn't been love. It had been guilt. She ended up on her sister's doorstep well past midnight. Amelia let her in without question. They sat on the couch. Lina said nothing for a long time, just stared at her hands. "He used me," she said at last. "And I let him." Amelia frowned. "I thought it was just a contract." "It was, until it wasn't." She didn't cry. Not yet. The pain was still too new, too bright. But the crack had formed, and deep down, something inside her was starting to shift. She wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. Dominic didn't sleep that night. He sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the same document she'd seen, now printed and laid out in front of him. He'd read it years ago, before it ever meant anything. Back when she was just a name, a formality. But now he saw it differently. Now he saw her face in every line, and he hated himself for it. He picked up his phone more than once, put it down again. What could he even say? Nothing could erase what he had done. But maybe Maybe he could do something else. He opened his laptop, called his lawyer, made a request that stunned the man into silence. Then he opened a file on his desktop, the one labeled Arden West merger, and deleted it, one clause at a time. Lina stayed with her sister for 3 days. She didn't answer his calls. She ignored his messages. She needed space, not because she hated him, but because she needed to feel herself again. On the 4th morning, she woke up nauseous. She blamed the stress, the coffee, the lack of sleep. But when the nausea came back the next day, and the next, she bought a test. She took it in silence. When she saw the result, her knees nearly buckled. 2 lines. She stared at it for 10 minutes before whispering, barely above a breath, "Oh God, pregnant, with his child. The same man who never chose her. The same man who bought her." And yet, she felt her hand instinctively go to her stomach. She didn't know what she was going to do. But for the first time since this marriage began, her decision wouldn't be made for her. It would be hers. Lina didn't tell anyone about the pregnancy. Not yet. The test sat in the bottom of her bag like a secret. She carried it with her everywhere, as if seeing it again and again might make it less real. She wasn't ready. Not for this. Not after everything. She walked the city for hours that day, past bookstores and bus stops through quiet streets lit by yellow windows. She ran her hand over her stomach more than once, still flat, still silent. But something had changed. Something fragile and terrifying and alive. When her phone rang again, Dominic, she declined the call. Again. And again. She didn't owe him anything. Or maybe she owed herself more than she'd ever realized. Dominic stared at his phone. The message had been delivered, but not read. He deserved that. He'd spent days trying to find the right words, to say something real, honest, human, but everything he typed felt hollow compared to what he'd done. So instead, he stopped writing and started acting. First, the lawyers. He met with them in person, told them to dismantle the merger clause effective immediately. The company would return control of West Industries to Lina's family. He didn't want negotiation. He didn't want leverage. He wanted it undone. All of it. Second, the press team. He halted the annual shareholder gala, canceled the quarterly merger celebration, quietly redirected funds to restructure the charity branch Lina had once casually praised. And lastly, the penthouse. He cleared the guest room. Not to convert it into a nursery. Not yet, but because he hoped she might come back. And if she did, he wanted her to have a place that felt like hers, not just another corner of his world. Lina returned home after a week, not because she forgave him, but because she needed answers. And silence could only protect her for so long. He was in the living room, unshaven, hands folded in his lap as if he'd been waiting. He stood when she entered. "Lina." She held up a hand. "Just listen." He did. Her voice was steady, clear. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Heavy. Alive. Dominic inhaled slowly. "I didn't expect." "I didn't either," she said. "And before you ask, no, I'm not telling you this because I want anything. You deserve to know." He took a step forward. She didn't move. "Is there anything I can do?" he asked softly. "Undo the past?" Her voice cracked. "Rewrite it?" "No," he said. "But I can change what happens next." She looked away. "I gave the company back," he said. "To your family. I canceled the merger clause. It's done." She turned, startled. "What?" "It was never about business," he said quietly. "Not anymore." "Then what was it?" He hesitated. Then, with more vulnerability than she'd ever seen in him, he said, "It was you." A pause. "You walked into a room 2 years ago and I told myself you were part of a transaction. But the truth is I've spent every day since trying not to feel something I couldn't name." Her throat tightened. "I saw you. Long before you knew I was looking. But I didn't know how to reach you without breaking everything else. Why now? She whispered. Because I already lost you. And I won't make peace with that. Lina said nothing. Not at first. She walked to the window, stared out at the city. And then, so softly he almost didn't hear it, she asked, "What if I can't trust you again?" He didn't flinch. "Then I'll keep proving it," he said. "Every day. Until I do." She didn't stay that night. But she didn't walk away either. And that was enough for now. Over the next days, something new unfolded between them. Not reconciliation. Not romance. But a quiet truce. They spoke carefully, honestly. Sometimes over tea. Sometimes over silence. She told him about the gallery. The artist with broken glass canvases. The child she taught once a week who only painted in blue. He listened. She told him how alone she had felt. He didn't try to explain it away. She told him about the moment she realized she was pregnant and how her first instinct had been to run. "That's not weakness," he said. "That's instinct. To protect yourself. And the baby." He met her gaze. "You'll be an extraordinary mother." She blinked back tears. "I'm not sure I even know how." "Then we'll figure it out," he said. Together. One evening, weeks later, she found a note on the kitchen counter. No big gestures. No flowers. Just paper. Handwritten. Simple. "I never learned how to be someone's partner. But if you'll have me, I want to learn. Not because I feel guilty. Not because of the baby. But because I miss you. Not the version you gave me. The one I never earned. Dominic." She read it 3 times. Then folded it. Placed it gently in her coat pocket. That night, she slept in her own room. But she left the door slightly open. Just enough light. Just enough hope. Lina didn't expect the shift to be so quiet. There were no grand gestures. No candlelit declarations. Just gentleness. A hand brushing hers when they reached for the kettle at the same time. A shared laugh over a crooked picture frame in the hallway. A warmth in his eyes when she spoke about the baby, the kind of warmth that wasn't polished or planned. Just real. She started spending more time in the penthouse again. Not because she had to, because she wanted to. Her bedroom door remained cracked, never closed. And sometimes when she fell asleep reading, she would wake to find a folded blanket at the foot of her bed. Or a cup of tea waiting, still warm. He never said he left them. She never asked. But the answer was clear. Dominic had stopped trying to fix things with explanations. Now he simply showed up. Quietly. Consistently. Every Friday he asked if she wanted a ride to the gallery. Every Saturday morning he asked what she felt like eating, not in passing but with actual intention. She never told him her cravings. But somehow there was always a bowl of fresh mango in the fridge. Or mint tea beside the sink. Or the exact crackers she kept in her purse already stocked in the cabinet. "You're paying attention," she said one evening, half teasing. He looked at her, soft. "I should have started sooner." She didn't answer. But her hand lingered on the counter beside his just a little longer. The gallery announced a charity exhibit for emerging artists. Lina was asked to co-curate. It was the first professional recognition she'd had in years. She almost said no. "I'm not ready," she told him, standing in the kitchen late one night, her hands wrapped around a cup of warm milk. Dominic looked up from the table. "Why not? I haven't done anything real in years. What if I fail? What if they only asked because of?" She stopped. "Because of me?" he said gently. She hesitated. His voice dropped. "Lina, they asked because they see what I see." She blinked. "Which is?" He looked at her, really looked. A woman who lost herself in someone else's silence and still managed to find her way out. The words hit harder than she expected. She nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll do it." He smiled. That night, she slept better than she had in weeks. The event was held in a converted railway hall, all exposed brick and high windows. Lina wore a soft cream dress that wrapped gently over her growing bump. She walked the exhibit with calm grace, explaining each piece to donors, volunteers, and press. Her voice steady. Her eyes clear. Dominic stayed at her side, not as a shadow, not as a shield, just there. Present, proud. People noticed. There were whispers. That Dominic Arden, once a ghost at his own events, now seemed alive in the presence of his wife. That Lina West, once a name with no face, now stood as a woman with her own orbit. Julian Graves arrived late. He smiled warmly when he saw her. "You glow," he said, not in flirtation, but in awe. "Pregnancy suits you." She laughed softly. "So they say." He turned to Dominic. "You're a lucky man." Dominic didn't answer immediately. He looked at Lina instead, the way her hair curled behind one ear, the way her fingers rested protectively over her belly. Then he said, "Yes, I am." Julian nodded. "Take care of her." "I intend to," Dominic replied. Lina felt something shift again in that moment. Not externally. Inside. A seed of belief. Maybe this man beside her was no longer the one who bought a marriage. Maybe he was the one learning how to love it. Later that week, Lina went to her first prenatal checkup. Dominic offered to come. She told him she was fine. He insisted anyway. In the sterile room, under warm lighting, they both stared at the flickering heartbeat on the monitor. It was small, rhythmic, real. Dominic didn't speak for a long time. Then, very quietly, he reached out and placed his hand over hers. Trembling, solid, wordless. Lina didn't pull away. When they left the clinic, he asked if she was hungry. She said yes. They shared lunch in a quiet cafe. No bodyguards, no tension. Just two people, once strangers in a contract, now holding the weight of something they had created together. He asked about names. She didn't laugh. They started a list. That night, Lina stood in the hallway outside her bedroom, staring at the closed door across from hers. Then she knocked. It was late. He was reading. He looked up. "Can't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head, then walked inside. Slowly. He didn't move. She sat beside him, folded her legs beneath her, looked at him without fear. "I don't know where this is going," she said softly. "I don't know if I can say everything I feel. Not yet. I don't expect you to. But I want to try," she whispered. Dominic said nothing. He simply reached out, tentative, patient, and took her hand. Not tightly, not possessively, just enough to say, "I'm here, and I'm not letting go." Spring came quietly. The air softened. Sunlight stayed longer. And in the penthouse, something bloomed that had been dormant far longer than winter. Lina woke most mornings to the sound of him making coffee. Not a maid. Not the kitchen staff. Just Dominic, brewing it the way she liked, with a pinch of cinnamon and too much milk. She started to sleep in his room more often. Not every night, but enough that the space between them felt less like an ocean, more like a still, shared shore. They didn't label what they had. They didn't need to. Every look, every small gesture, spoke louder than anything they'd said in the first year of their marriage. But trust, real trust, still moved slowly, and Lina could feel something hovering just outside the light. The letter arrived in a black envelope. It was discreet, sealed with gold, from a global investment firm known for acquiring the unacquirable. The letter inside was brief, clinical, an offer. $25 million for Dominic's shares in the Arden West parent company. Clean. Final. All it required was his signature. He read it 3 times, then stared at the line where he'd have to sign. He knew what it meant. If he accepted, it would undo every remnant of the merger, the business marriage that had started it all. It would give up not just ownership, but legacy. His name, his father's name, everything he had built to stay in control. It would also mean freedom for her, for both of them. But when he looked up, Lina was standing in the doorway. She had seen the envelope. She had seen the name. Her face went still. "I thought it was over," she said. "It is," he replied quietly. "Then what is that?" Dominic stood, walked toward her. "It's the last piece." She folded her arms, fighting the tremble in her voice. "You said the contract was gone." "It is." "Then why does this feel like a test?" "It's not," he said. "It's a choice. One I should have made before I ever met you." She looked away. "Lina," he said gently, "this company was never supposed to be my legacy. I just didn't know that until I nearly lost something better." She didn't respond. He handed her the letter. "If you ask me not to sign it," he said, "I won't." She stared at him. "And if I don't say anything, I'll still sign it," he said, "because I want a life that doesn't depend on leverage, on contracts, on keeping you beside me with paper." "I never asked for this," she whispered. "I know. That's why I'm giving it back." She looked at him, then really looked, not at the businessman, not at the strategist, at the man, flawed, real, hers. She didn't say thank you. She didn't cry. She simply reached out and took his hand. And he knew, without a word, that something had shifted again. Not because of what he had lost, but because of what he was finally ready to give. That evening he signed the letter. He placed it in a courier envelope, sent it without ceremony. No announcement, no press release, just closure. Lina watched him seal it, and for the first time since the day she stood in her father's study, she felt the invisible thread finally break. She wasn't a deal. She wasn't a pawn. She was free. They celebrated quietly. Dinner on the balcony. Candles. A blanket around her shoulders when the air cooled. No speeches. No fancy wine. Just him. Her. The bump between them. "Have you thought about names?" she asked. He nodded. "One." She raised an eyebrow. "Only one. It's all I need." She waited. "Hope," he said. She exhaled softly. "It's perfect." He took her hand. And in the silence that followed, nothing needed to be said. Because for the first time since their names were joined on paper, they were finally becoming a family. The hospital room was quiet, dimly lit by the pale morning light slipping past the blinds. Dominic sat beside her bed, one hand wrapped around Lina's, the other cradling something impossibly small and warm. Their daughter. She had arrived just before dawn. Strong, loud, determined to be heard from the moment she entered the world. Lina had wept when she first held her. So had Dominic, though only Lina saw it. And now, in the hush of the aftermath, all he could do was stare. 10 tiny fingers, a soft whimper, the faintest smile in her sleep. He looked at Lina, still pale from the delivery, eyes closed, chest rising and falling with steady exhaustion. He had never seen anyone more beautiful. He placed the baby in the bassinet, walked back to her side, and leaned down, resting his forehead against hers. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. Lina didn't open her eyes, but she smiled. "Then spend the rest of your life earning it." 3 weeks later, the penthouse felt different. It wasn't the bassinet in the living room or the changing table in the corner of their bedroom. It wasn't even the lullabies echoing through the night or the bottles stacked neatly by the sink. It was the way it finally felt lived in. Dominic came home earlier now. Always. He didn't check his email during dinner. He held the baby through her 3 a.m. cries. He learned how to swaddle. He forgot to care what the world thought of his clumsy lullaby hums. And Lina, she was no longer a shadow. She laughed now, not often, not always loudly, but enough that it filled the corners of the space they used to call home but never lived in. He painted one of the guest rooms for her, not the baby's, hers, turned it into a studio, bought her canvases, brushes, oils, never said a word when she found them waiting with a note that read, "You gave me back my life. Let me give you space for yours." She kissed him that night, really kissed him, and for the first time it wasn't careful. It wasn't polite. It wasn't married. It was theirs. They didn't talk about the beginning much anymore. Not because they wanted to forget it, but because they had made peace with it. Sometimes it would come up, quietly, in the middle of something ordinary. Like one evening, while folding laundry, Lina glanced up and asked, "Would you have married me if it hadn't been for the contract?" Dominic paused, then sat beside her. "Probably not," he admitted. She raised an eyebrow. "But not because I wouldn't have wanted to," he added. "Because I wouldn't have believed I deserved someone like you." Lina looked at him for a long moment, then leaned in, rested her head on his shoulder. "You almost didn't," she said softly. He nodded. "I know." They stayed that way until the baby cried again. And Dominic, without hesitation, got up to go to her. On the night of their 3rd anniversary, Lina found herself alone on the rooftop garden Dominic had quietly rebuilt for her. It was quiet, starry, the air warm. She thought he had forgotten the date. He'd been running late from a board meeting she insisted he take. She didn't mind. She wasn't the woman who needed flowers and fancy dresses anymore. She was the woman who had learned what love looked like in silence, in the daily choice, in the way he now reached for her hand even when no one was watching. Still, she blinked in surprise when she saw the table set for 2. Candles, her favorite dish, and him standing there in a white shirt, sleeves rolled, nervous and barefoot. "Dominic," he stepped forward. "I didn't get you a ring that day," he said. "Not really." She smiled. "It wasn't that kind of wedding." "I know." He pulled something from his pocket. A simple band. Silver. Unadorned. "But this is." He didn't kneel. He didn't need to. "I love you," he said. "No contracts. No clauses. No expectations. Just, if you'll still have me, I'd like to ask you again. This time for real." Lina stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "You already have me," she whispered. "But yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger. And this time, when they kissed, it wasn't the beginning of a contract. It was the beginning of forever. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and comment. Because sometimes even a marriage built on paper can turn into something real.